All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to those of you who joined me this morning for my Getting Started in Engineering Education. Um, I'm going to go over some basic information again before we get started for those of you who this is your first webinar with us. So my name is Karen Sauer. I am a Senior Professional Development Provider here at EIE. We're located in Boston, Massachusetts, and it is great to see so many people from across the country joining us today. And I know this morning we had someone joining us from Mexico, so this has been great. Welcome to our Getting Started with Hands-on Learning Materials Management. This afternoon, we're going to go over some things to keep in mind when you're first starting project-based learning or engineering education in your classroom. Materials management is a really big issue because you have a lot of stuff happening and a lot of materials moving around the classroom, as well as your students are moving around the classroom. And so hopefully these are some tips and tricks that you can take back and implement immediately, whether you're starting your school year next week or if you're starting closer to the beginning of September. So our webinar goal today is to increase educator preparedness and confidence to source, organize, and store materials needed for problem-based learning. Right, so hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a whole bunch of ideas of what you're going to be doing, and maybe a whole bunch of ideas of things that you're going to have to go out and get prepared. One quick logistical thing before we move into the content itself. For those of you who didn't join us this morning, I just want to show you how to change your participant status. We're going to be watching a lot of videos during this webinar, and we use the participant status to ensure that you have gotten to the end of the video before we move on. So what you can do to change your status is there's that little man at the top of your screen waving at you. If you click on the drop-down menu, you have a number of choices of things that you can change your status to. We regularly use the agree button, so if you click on agree, you can see that the little man turns to an agree button. So to get started today, let's give that a practice. So if you guys can follow along, if everyone can change their status to agree. I see a whole bunch of people doing it. Great. Betsy, that could be on your end, but I can see, we'll see if there's something we can do on our end. We'll look into that. But that could be something on, yeah, okay, that might be something on with your speakers. You might want to fiddle with them a little bit. Sorry about that, Betsy. If you've changed your status to agree, great. Let's practice really quickly removing our status or clearing it. So if you go back to that little person at the top of the screen, do the click down, you have an option to clear your status. Good suggestion. Yeah, if you have two windows open, you might be hearing me twice. Rosanna, if you email eiepdonline@mos.org, they will email you the link for your colleagues to join you. Okay? All right, so let us move on. It looks like everybody has had a chance to clear their status. So to get started, we kind of broke this webinar down into three categories, a before, a during, and an after. So let's start with before you introduce hands-on learning to your students or engage in an engineering design challenge. So you need to begin at the beginning. You're going to need stuff to teach hands-on learning. You can't do this without any materials. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you gather or collect your stuff so that way you can engage your students in these activities. So let's think a little bit about how you already manage your materials in your classroom, just to get a feel of what people are already doing, and maybe we can use those ideas as we go forward as well. So I want you to think about how do you currently manage materials in your classroom, and if you currently don't do any project-based, problem-based learning, you can say that. It's like, hey, I'm new to this, and that's fine. So in the chat pod, if you wouldn't mind answering this question. All right, I see a couple people typing in the chat pod, so we're going to give them a second or so. Yes, lots of plastic bins labeled and filled with stuff. Labeled bins, oh, some people not so well, so maybe this will give you some ideas. It seems that bins are pretty popular, and labels as well. I know I have a lot of, that is definitely how I stored my materials, a lot of bins, and usually some labels, but sometimes I'd forget that part, and that would make it a little difficult. I do like the idea of clear bins, because then you can look inside of them and actually see what is in them without having to remove the 3 bins on top of that bin to check inside. Clear bins, very helpful. All right, so it seems like we all have very similar ways of structuring or managing our materials to start. Definitely storing the bins, some cabinets. Oh, I like that idea. The students choose the materials from a checklist, and then she brings them out or sets them up for the students. So only having the materials that are in their plan. So instead of giving them like free range of everything, well, they're given free range of everything. You're just ensuring that they're staying on plan, and I like that. All right, so I'm going to go over some things that we like to consider before and give you some thoughts on how to manage these materials. And I have a feeling that some of it is going to come back to those clear bins with clear labels on them. But there's some other things that we like to consider when we're managing our materials as well. So some before considerations is you need to gather your materials, and in some cases you need to do some prep work as well. You need to prepare some of the things ahead of time, so that way when your students are using them, they're all set up and you don't have to be setting them up as you have, 30 students staring at you. So to gather your materials, if you're lucky enough to be doing a lesson where there is a materials list already printed out for you, that makes life a little easier. So this is an example of one of the Engineering as Elementary units, Water, Water Everywhere, Designing Water Filters. We have these material lists that are in the curriculum. They also are downloadable on our website, so you can see what the materials are. But I want to take a closer look at these materials themselves. Betsy, you have this exact page sitting on your desk? That's wonderful. So you're going to be able to hopefully give us some information about this. So we have these, this is a close-up of that materials list, and you can see there's cheesecloth, there's cornstarch, there's cotton balls, there's a whole bunch of things that, are pretty common. There's nothing out of, super ordinary there. So my question to you is, how can you source these materials found in the kit? So in EIE, we do sell the kits prepackaged, as well as we sell just the binder with the materials list. So if you choose not to buy a kit that goes along with an engineering curriculum, how can you source some of these materials on this list? What do you guys think? All right, I see some people writing down, so we're going to give them a second. Yes, asking parents for some donations before you start the unit. Definitely a great option, kind of thinking about, right, what do you need, and asking your parents, maybe asking the PTA, if you're recycling, yep. So really thinking about how can you get these materials in a way that is not adding to your expense, because we know that teachers do spend a lot of their own money when it comes to their classrooms. So asking other people if they can help donate some of the materials they might have extras of, things like that. And in Engineering as Elementary, we actually have a letter in all of our Engineering as Elementary units that goes home to the family. And the top of the letter is really, it talks about what are the students going to be doing. They're going to be engineering. Why are we doing this? Why is it important for them? And then all the way at the bottom of the family letter, there's a whole bunch of blank lines. And this is your opportunity as the teacher to say, hey, if you happen to have some juice cartons lying around, or not lying around, give them to us clean. If you happen to have some juice cartons that you just finished using, you wouldn't mind washing them out and then sending them in with your student. This is a great place to gather those recyclable donations you might need and other things. So I think definitely asking for people around you. And yeah, I think that's a great idea, Leslie, asking school business partners. If your school has partnered with a business or a local corporation, talking to them and seeing what things they can do. I mean, they like supporting engineering and other problem project-based experiences because the kids really enjoy it, the teachers really enjoy it, and it's just a great opportunity for them. So ask around, see who can support you and donate. All right, so after you've gathered your materials, you do need to begin preparing your materials as well. So in a second, we're going to watch this video about just basically getting started and gathering your materials. But even before you begin to prepare your materials, you really need to sit down with your activity guide or your teacher guide in the case of engineering is elementary, or any other activities you've found on the internet. You need to read through the guide and give yourself some time to understand what the guide is saying, and then keep in mind how much time it's going to take you to prepare the prepare the materials as well. What we're going to do now is we're going to watch a clip from our Getting Started video on materials management. So we do have a 4-part video series on our website basically to get you started, and one of them is all about materials, and so we're going to show you some clips of that throughout this webinar today. But this one is on just preparing your materials and getting them ready. So we're going to play it in 1 second. As we're playing it, I want you to just think about, are you gathering any tips from this? Is there anything that's really interesting about what you notice in the video? And then when the video is done, if you can change your status to agree, so I know that all of the videos that people have had success in playing the video. Sometimes there is some buffering problems based on internet and things like that, but hopefully the video should play smoothly for everyone. If a lot of people start to have problems, we'll share the link with the entire video for you to watch after the session today. All right, so I'm going to mute my mic and we're going to play the video.
Some EIE units take minimal prep, while others take a lot. The materials you receive in your kit are all different depending on the unit you're teaching. For some units, you'll have to create individual base models for every group of students. Groups will use these models to build upon for the design challenge. For instance, you will have to build a replica of a knee for our knee brace unit, or a windmill for our wind unit. Most models you create can be used year after year. Additionally, some units require a single testing station. Testing stations allow a whole class to observe and experiment with materials and designs together as a large group. For many units, you'll also need to prepare sets of sample materials. These samples allow students to explore the properties of each material before they make their design choices.
Great. It looks like a lot of people have changed their status to agree. So thank you very much. For you guys, just to kind of quickly review, if you look at the top of your screen, all the way above the pods with the video pod and the PowerPoint pod, there's a little man waving at you. If you actually click on the drop-down menu there, you can change your status to agree, and that gives you a little green check button. So as we go through and watch the videos, you guys can use that going forward. All right. So we had a chance to observe, just to get some thoughts on the Getting Started video. Did anybody want to reflect on that before we move on to the next part of preparing our materials? Was there anything that somebody wanted to discuss? All right, great. All right, so this next video, we're just going to play in the back, well, actually here. So in addition to preparing materials, this is kind of broken down into 3 categories: building your base models, setting up your testing stations, and assembling sample material sets. And I'm going to explain what each of those means as we go through. So the first one is building base models. So we're going to play this video. It doesn't have any sound. We're just going to play it right now, and I'm just kind of talk over it as we go. So this is one of our how-to videos, and in this video, and these are all available on our website as well, we've sped it up a little bit and removed some of the content just to show you more of the visual of them putting things together. In this video, this woman is creating a base model, which is a standard component of an engineering challenge design. What she's creating is a base model knee. And you can see that wiffle ball is the kneecap. Well, what she's adding right now is the kneecap. The wiffle ball was the joint. So in that video, she's creating this base model, and this is what the kids are going to use to create their knee brace on. So they'll be constructing a knee brace, and they'll be using the knee model as a basically as a model to determine if their knee brace is working or not. So in this case, let's pull through. In this case, we also do have the directions in our teacher guides as well for the base models, but I feel that the videos are really helpful. And this is a great example of something that you would need to prepare ahead of time. You can't be creating these while the students are in the room. I mean, you can see this woman's using a large blade to really get through that cardboard to make the knees. So this is something you need a little quiet for. So making sure that your base models are set and complete ahead of time are important. And you also need to keep in mind that you need a base model for each group of students that are going to be working. So this would be only for one group of students. This teacher would have to make multiple sets. These are some teacher tips that we pulled from the teacher guide No Bones About It, which is where they would be using this base model. And you can see that we are mentioning that while it does take a significant amount of time to assemble this knee, they do use it again in lesson 4. So right now she's creating it for their lesson 3 activity. The other thing is, if you're doing this year after year, this model can be used again and again. So these are things to keep in mind when you are preparing your materials is, are these materials things that you're going to be able to use again in the future? And then if they are, it goes back to, well, where are you going to store it? Some additional base model considerations is how many base models do you need to make and how are they going to be used? So just some things to think about as you're doing this. How many groups do you want in your classroom, and do you want them to be all working with the model, or do they only test on the model? These are important things to be thinking about. After the base model, you also have to, in some cases, some engineering activities require a testing station. So these are areas of your classroom or areas around your school, depending on what types of things you're testing, that are used by multiple student groups to test their design. So it would just be maybe one testing station for your entire classroom, and everybody's going to have to rotate through this space. So I'm going to be showing you a video in a second of a testing station for catching the wind, designing windmills. But I first want to show you a diagram of what it's going to look like because it's a little hard to see in the video. It's also a little hard to see in the diagram, so hopefully together you'll get a good understanding. So in this, you can see that the testing station is made up of, we have 2 rulers. On the outside, they're the yellow squares or rectangles. Now imagine these 2 rulers are placed between 2 tables at a distance of 8 to 10 feet. And then there's fishing line running between the rulers. And on that fishing line, there's a foam tray with 2 straws underneath. So the straw is what the fishing line runs through, and this foam tray moves easily over this fishing line. So it's a little tricky to imagine in your head, but hopefully this will help when you watch the video. This is more of a three-dimensional interpretation of it. You can see again the foam tray there, right there, and the fishing line. And the students have added their design, so they're testing different sails in this lesson. So let's see. You have the ruler back there and your fishing line. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to be observing Laura, who is the teacher. She's facilitating student engagement at the testing station that uses that setup I just showed you. While we're doing that, I just want you to think about her facilitation at the testing station, because I know while this webinar is about materials management, we also have to think about facilitation because we're teachers and we always think about facilitation. So, you know, I feel like I would not be able to ask you guys to not even think about Laura's facilitation. So let's reflect on that as well. When the video is complete, please change your status to agree, and then in the chat pod, if you can answer the question about Laura's facilitation. I'm going to mute my mic and we're going to play the video.
You're next. You put it on there how you want it. I don't know, his looks different. Too, his is different from all the others I've seen too. Okay, bit number 3. Is he catching? Look at that. Yeah, it is. Look. Back up, Kaya. Kaya, look at him. Kaya. I'm trying to say Kaya. So I wonder if there's a way that you can get this side to go like how this one is. Because this side's catching really well, but this one seems like it's...
All right, so I think most people have gotten to the end of the video. I see a lot of people have changed their status to agree. Thank you. And great, I see that you guys are noticing she used a lot of different questioning strategies. She was encouraging her students to pay attention, to observe what was happening with the other students, encouraging collaboration. I think that's a really important piece about engineering. It's so easy for our students and for ourselves sometimes to fall into a competitive mindset, and we really want to encourage students when they're engineering. Well, we want them to succeed and we want them to do really well. We also want to remind them that they're collaborating and they're sharing ideas and they're working together. And so I think that's really important. Right, she was encouraging and like redirected, but she didn't take over the conversation, which is also really important. She let the students go through the learning themselves. One thing you might have also noticed is hopefully you got a better view of the testing station itself. When the video camera kind of panned across, you could see this testing station takes up a lot of space. So this is something that you would need to think about ahead of time. You know, and so considering these additional testing considerations, location, where are you doing this? Do you actually have space to do this in your classroom, or are you going to put this type of testing station somewhere else. So the space needed is really important. And how are you going to use the testing stations? She had a great opportunity. She was able to stand with her students and be at the testing station because she had another teacher or another adult in the room with her who was working with the rest of the students and kind of supporting them and guiding them as well. So thinking about, you know, do you need to have someone manning the testing station while you have it in the room, or is this something that your students can use on your own? In this case, the students were second graders, so they did need a little additional support. And like you all mentioned, she offered a lot of great comments to the students, and so it was really important for her to be at the testing station to help the students in their improvements as they moved along. Great, so wonderful observations. If anybody, you know, has anything else, just kind of type it in. But we're going to move on to one of our other videos. Sorry, the chat pod changed, but you can continue any conversations here. This next part is thinking about setting up your sample materials ahead of time as well. So we like to set up small samples of materials that are available for the engineering challenges for the students to investigate ahead of time. Because we need to remember that not every student is going to have had access to all of the materials that we use in our challenges before the experience. And so by providing them sample material bags, it gives them a chance to explore the properties of their materials. And it helps to level the playing field and increase the equity of the experience for everyone. The other thing is by having the sample materials in front of them, the students are directly looking at the materials they're going to have access to, and they don't have to worry so much about their recall. They can be looking at the materials as they're coming up with their next plan. So one tip we do have, though, when you set up material bags is do not give the students large sizes of materials, because then they start to build their design, and we really want the sample materials to be part of that brainstorming planning stage. So we want them to use the materials and come up with a plan, but we don't want them to start constructing yet. So we always give them small samples, so that way they're only using them for inspiration. So in this video, I want us to watch how Julie is framing the material exploration with her students. They're first graders, and they are getting ready to test the material properties during Lesson 3 of Engineering Elementary's bug unit, The Best of Bugs, Designing Hand Pollinators. Again, when you are done with the video, please change your status to agree, and you can put your answers in the chat pod for this question on the slide. I'm going to mute my.
If I gave you a bag like this, these are going to be the only supplies you have. In your head, I want you to think about, how could I use what Mrs. Mock gave me? How could I use this bag to create a hand pollinator? I want you to write what property it has that will help it.
All right, so it looks like a lot of you have changed your status to agree. A couple of people mentioned that the video, they lost the video or it froze. Again, we are recording this webinar and we will be archiving it to our website within the next 2 weeks. So if you do want to come back and watch it, you definitely have a chance to see it. The check screen is the end of the video, so if it's gotten to that part, that means the video has played to the end, but you might have missed some of it along the way. Sometimes the playback changes for everybody based on the internet you have on your end and sometimes the computer you're utilizing. But like I said, we are recording this, so if you want to watch it again, you'll be able to view the archive. All right, so it looks like a lot of you are commenting on how Julie has framed the material exploration. She is having the children think and plan of how they can use the materials before they actually receive them. So she's giving them some directions ahead of time, kind of priming them and getting them ready to think critically about what they are getting. And start to give them a chance to brainstorm and come up with ways to use them. So she's explaining to them why she's distributing these materials, and I think that's, really important. She's getting them into the right mindset to begin imagining and coming up with ideas of what they want to do next. All right, so I have a few more slides just around sample materials. So in our teacher guide, this is just some information on the unit you were just hearing a little bit about from Julie. So you can see that we have the directions in the teacher guide to prepare the sample bag. So it's prepare the bag, put one of these, one of those. We tell you about how big it is. And then you're also welcome to add your own materials as well. So it's really great if you want to add your own twist to things. Some material sample considerations is, again, how many sample material sets will be used in the design. So how many of these materials do you need? How many sample bags? And where are you going to store them when you're done? Because as you start to create all these samples, you have dedicated a lot of time to this prep. It would make sense to think about also where are you going to store it when you're done. So some other additional things to consider before you begin teaching is, are there any anchor charts that you should prepare ahead of time? Anything for your students to that are going to have some guiding questions on them? Anything for group results, directions? Do you need to produce any handouts? How big are your group sizes as well? We usually like to encourage a group of about 3. We find that works really well. Students don't feel left out in that number. And also roles. You need to give your students roles of who's going to do what. And sometimes that's really helpful, especially when they're first starting to do collaborative work, is to kind of explain what the roles on the team might be. Okay, so these are all things to consider ahead of time. And so now we're going to take a poll, because I know it's a lot to do ahead of time, and there's just not enough time in your day to do all of this. So I want to ask you, who are you going to ask to help you prepare some of these materials? And if you have any other suggestions, you can definitely put them in the chat pod, or if you have any questions. I mean, this is a webinar full of teachers, so if you have any additional questions for your peers, we can also ask them here about preparing the materials. Because I know it is a large time crunch and constraint on what you can do in the classroom, what you can't. But if you spend a lot of time doing your prep work ahead of time, ideally once you start with the actual lessons, they should really flow very naturally for you, and the students will definitely enjoy the experiences. So it looks like a lot of you are saying, seeing if there's students who can help you prepare the materials. I mean, I definitely, if you have middle school or high school students that need volunteer hours, and you have that type of program at your school, you might be able to have those students come in and do some volunteer work. If there's another teacher in your school who is going to be trying out engineering education this year, maybe you can help them kind of prep for their lesson, and then they'll help you prep for your lesson. I've also heard stories about people bringing it home and making their significant other sit there and cut things and help them make things while they watch television. So I know I can't make time appear for you so that way you can get more time to do this, but hopefully there's a couple of things. There's a couple of people you might be able to have support you as you go through this. Okay. So now that we have gotten through all of our before, right? We've talked about gathering and getting your materials. So you need to find your materials list, sending a letter home to your family for donations. You guys also mentioned corporate donations, other people, businesses, things like that. Preparing your materials, thinking about your base models, your testing stations, and any sample material sets that you might have. So now, what about during? So as you're teaching, materials management and classroom management goes hand in hand. It's really important. You need to think about how are your students going to access these materials? What does material distribution and storage look like? How are you going to get all of this into your students' hands? Where are you putting those testing stations? We talked about them a little bit in before, but this is also an important thing of during. And then again, those class data, your anchor charts, and design storage for between iterations. Because yes, space is a big issue, and you need to think about how much space are you going to be using ahead of time, so that way you're not surprised as you go through it. Hopefully you'll be able to plan ahead a little bit. So materials distribution. You can see in this video, sorry, not this video, in these images, we have what we consider a material store. So in this case, all of the students have access to the material store and they're coming in. You might notice one of the students, actually a couple of them have some papers with them. So they have their plans and they're coming and they're picking up exactly what they need. Here we have another material store. This teacher even named it the one-stop shop. So setting up some place where your students can access the materials is really important. So we're going to watch a video now of one of our teachers actually working at one of those kind of material stores. She's almost there just kind of watching and making sure that the students are taking what they need, keeping to their plan. So in this video, this is lesson 4 of Water Everywhere, our Designing Water Filters unit. We have a couple of slides with that that unit in this webinar. And this, you might notice there's a range of student ages here. This is a Montessori school, and it's a 1st through 6th grade classroom. Right, so while we're watching this video, I just want you to observe how this teacher handles her material management in her classroom. And again, when we get to the end of the video, if you can change your status to agree, that would be great.
1. And is that 2? Okay. And goodbye. Pleasure doing business with you.
One set of paper filters.
1 set of paper filters. Here you go. And plus?
Here's your $60.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
I have a cup of gravel.
Okay. Here's your cup. Is that all? No? Okay. Hi, Annika. What do you need?
Okay, so you might have noticed in that video that the teacher was basically using it as a real store and kind of talking about the students who are coming and purchasing the materials. So this is definitely another way for the students to access the materials. I see a couple of people adding some comments, so I'm going to give them a chance to add their thoughts to the conversation. And while they're doing that, I'm just going to kind of point out a couple of strategies that you might have noticed in the video. The teacher is having the students use like a plate to move the materials around. Right, they came prepared with lists, which is really important. Yeah, having the teacher pass out the materials is very important to ensure that the students are taking what they need. There sometimes is a fine line between an engineering design challenge and what might become an arts and crafts project. And so giving the kids free range to all the materials, they might move beyond that thoughtful choosing of materials and just start adding things. And we want them to be really thoughtful in their choices of the materials that they're using. So by ensuring that they have a plan, they have their prepared list, the teacher is double checking on them to make sure that they're taking what they need. These are all great ways to manage material distribution in your classroom. This video doesn't have any sound. We're just going to kind of play this video on a loop. And this is an example of one of the testing stations. So we showed you the testing station before for our wind unit, catching the wind. This one is for our simple machines unit. And as you can see, this is taking up also a lot of space on the floor. Once we start playing it, you'll see how the students are using it. So these are fifth graders doing lesson 3 of the Marvelous Machines Making Work Easier. So they are testing levers, they're testing pulleys, and they're using spring scales. There's a lot of stuff going on in this classroom, and the teacher is utilizing a lot of different spaces so that way he can ensure that all of the stations are, the students are using all the stations at the same time. And so you can see a lot of prep work went into this. The teacher has these lines on the floor, had the pulleys on the door, making sure that everything is safe and kind of placed appropriately. So there might be some days that you need to think of ahead of time and, think about, all right, maybe we do the testing after lunch because I can take, a couple of extra minutes during my lunch break to set up my materials. Or again, if the students are helping you, they can come in at lunchtime and maybe help you set up the materials as well. All right, but I mean, it is a lot of work for you on your part as the teacher, but look at those students in the video. They definitely seem really engaged and on task with what they're doing. So while project-based, problem-based learning is a little more work on your end, hopefully by watching some of these videos, you're also seeing a lot of the benefits of it as well. Okay. So the last thing for during that I want to point out is just a couple of other things keeping in mind is your class data, your anchor charts, and design storage. So if your students are collecting data like in this picture, the students were collecting data of parachute designs in lesson 3. They then are going to use this data to support their designs in lesson 4. And so this is a chart that needs to be held on to. So you've created this anchor chart to support your students. You need to make sure that you store it someplace that you'll be able to pull it back out when you come back to the next part. And I know in the last webinar, someone was saying that they might only be teaching engineering once a week or once every other week. So in that case, making sure you know which charts you need to hold on to is really important. So thinking about that. And then also your design storage. So this is an example of thinking inside the box, designing plant packages. And you can see they don't take up too much room, but each group has their own plant package that they've designed, and there is a live plant in it. So you need to think about where are you going to store this between the students doing their iterations and working on their designs. Some of the engineering units we have take up a lot more space, like our bridges unit. Some of them take up a lot less space, like our pollinators unit. So definitely thinking about how much space you're going to need is really important. So your during considerations, just to kind of recap, is your material distribution and your storage. Are you going to have a material store to allow your students to come up and pick up their resources? How are you going to manage that? Are you going to have them create their plan and a list and come up and buy their materials? And then, where are you going to store those materials between hand? We didn't really talk about that, but that is something that you need to keep in mind, is where those materials are going to go between classes. Your testing stations, the pulleys and the levers, you start to take up a lot of space. So again, thinking about what time of day are you going to do that lesson to ensure that you have time to set up those materials. Maybe it's the first thing in the morning, you set it up before you go home at night. And then the last thing is just thinking about the transition of materials you use in one lesson that you're going to need to pull back out for the next one. So is there class data or charts that you need to save? And then your design storage between iterations. Where are you going to be placing your designs while the students are thinking about improvements? All right, now to the after. So your students have completed their design challenge. They have produced their technology that they've created. Now, how are you going to store your materials or replace the materials you used up? There are many of the materials in our engineering elementary units are reusable year to year, but there are some things that need to be replaced or replenished. And if you're using another type of engineering activity, I'm sure the same applies to that as well. So after you have completed your design challenge, you need to think about where the material is going to be stored and replacement. So if you buy one of the engineering elementary units, you guys talked earlier about clear tubs with labels. Well, we send you the unit packaged that way. So there's a nice big label. The color of the label matches the color of the binder, so it's easy to put the two together. And it's clear so you can see what's inside of it. So just like your suggestion, that's what we've tried to do with our unit. So if you do choose to do that, it's already in a clear box. You're all set. If you're sourcing it yourself, definitely Clear Bin is going to be a great first step. Something else that we like to do that is not in our kits, but we definitely encourage teachers to do it to their kits when they receive it, is create your storing material bags. So you can see here where that little arrow is, and I've added my other arrow. This one says it's lesson 3 and 4 of sound. So we've actually written on our materials what lesson it goes to, so that way when we go into our bin and I'm pulling out stuff and I haven't seen it in a year and I pull out this bag of crayons and I go, wait, why did I put crayons in this box? I remember, right, it's for lesson 3 and 4. I can refer back to the teacher guide and I know what it's used for. It also makes it easy when I'm passing out materials to students. I just am pulling out everything that says lesson 3 because that's where I am at this point. So a little bit of work ahead of time makes a big difference if you repeat units year after year. Some other tips is don't store completed designs. If your students have completed a design challenge, we highly recommend that when they're done, take a picture if they want to save their design, and then remind them that we're going to break it down because the next set of students are going to do the design again. So by not storing completed designs, you're saving a lot of space. It also puts the materials back into your kit so you can use them again for future years. And also, sometimes when the students see a design that someone created the previous year, they start to think that that's the right answer. And in engineering, we like to think about multiple solutions, and we really don't want the students to get stuck on what they think is the one right answer. So having a completed design in front of them as they start to embark sometimes can confuse them or make it a little harder for them to come up with their own ideas. All right, so replacing materials. So that was all kind of storing your materials. Replacing your materials. If you are going off of that Water Everywhere Designing Water Filters materials list, we do actually list on the list that there are consumables. So those are the things that we've put in this box here. So it's very easy for you to go in and say, okay, I completed this unit. These are the things I need to think about for next year. These are the things that I need to find or ask my parents for donations, use that family letter again. So kind of focusing in on that, that's really important. And if you are using EIE and you're interested, this is our website, so eiestore.com. And this is the Thinking Inside the Box Designing Plant Packages page. So if you go to this page, you can see I've kind of circled it. This is our materials kit. But we also have refill kits. So if you do want, in the case of some of these where it's, you know, straws and cotton balls, you as teachers probably will not have any problem replenishing those supplies. Some of our units are a little bit more tricky, and you might actually want to get the materials like our replicating an artifact. That requires a lot of different rocks. Sometimes it's just easier to get the kit. But these are other things to think about, is you do need to think about, if you're doing a lesson, what does replenishment look like? Because if it worked well, you're going to want to do it again. So you want to ensure that you that it makes sense. It's something that you can do year after year. Right, so just a quick review: storing materials and replacing your materials. 2 main things to think about as you end your unit. So as we come into our last 10 minutes, and I'm going to give some time for questions, which is great, I do want us to watch one more clip from our Getting Started video materials overview. In this video, 3rd grade teacher Kate Lentz is talking about materials management. And just giving her perspective on her personal experience working with materials. So we're going to play this video in a second. Once we do, again, I'll turn off my mic. When the video gets to the end, please change your status to agree. And if you want, you can, I see some people already taking the little poll there on the bottom. You can take that poll, or if you want, you can definitely wait till the end of the video to take that poll as well.
Process, it does take time, but I'm making the base models and I'm realizing I can use these year after year after year. And then another point that's really, it's just, this is the one for me that's so important, is when the kids get the base models and they start putting the design challenge to work, it's really authentic, it's engaging, they're collaborating, they're using the models as a forum for conversation and working together, and failing and then trying again. And yes, it is a lot of work, but in the end, it is so worth it.
All right, so it looks like a lot of people, the video has come to the end. Hopefully, again, there hasn't been too much buffering problems on your end. If there is, when we move into the next layout, I'll give you the website so you can watch that whole Getting Started video. It's only a couple of minutes long, and there's a bunch of other ones on that website as well. So if you haven't done so already, if you can answer our poll question on the bottom, it's how prepared do you now feel about materials management? I know attending a 60-minute webinar is not going to prepare you as much as actually getting your hands on your materials and starting to prepare it, but hopefully this has given you a little more confidence in your ability and has given you some excitement about this upcoming school year. So I've just set the poll to broadcast so you can get a feel of how everybody else is feeling. We do have somebody who's feeling amazing, which is wonderful. But thankfully, you know, it looks like a lot of people are feeling a little less anxious or feeling great, which is really what I want to hear. There's always a level of anxiety when you're trying something new, especially at the beginning of the school year when you're just getting used to your kids as well and they're getting used to you. So hopefully this has given you an opportunity to think a little bit more about what you're going to be doing this year. and to maybe break open some boxes of, if you do have some engineering as elementary kits in your school, open those boxes and take a look at what's inside, and start, thinking about your plan, or, how much time is it going to take to set up the materials, your testing stations, and all of those things. All right, so I'm going to move us to our wrap up. Our wrap-up layout, and in this layout you can definitely let me know if you have any questions or any concerns, because I do want people to leave this webinar feeling less anxious. So if there's something about materials management that we didn't cover today, definitely give me send me a question, and we can hopefully give you some information or some tips. Some other things that I have in this layout right now is there is a pod that says files at the bottom, and there's a if you click on it, it says how to choose an EIE unit handout. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about Engineering as Elementary Art in School curriculum, this is a really great handout for you to take a look at to see, how we match up with what subjects you might already be teaching. So while it is an engineering curriculum, we do match the curriculum with science topics that you're teaching. So definitely download that if you're interested in seeing more. While I wait to see if there's some questions for people to come in, I do want to remind people or let people know that we do have 4 more webinars this week. Tomorrow we're going to be focusing on engineering integration. So ELA and engineering and STEM integration will be tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we're going to focus in on engineering pedagogy. We've got a great activity around questioning strategies. So you might have noticed that Laura did a really great job of kind of facilitating her students' inquiry, but not giving them all the information. And so during the questioning strategies, we're going to get a little bit more into that. And then think like an engineer. We're going to focus in on our engineering habits of mind and thinking about how we can promote that in our students. All right. So yep. This is more information on our customer service, our store, and our sales team. So if you are interested, they've also added that information to the questions pod. So feel free, go visit them, give us a call, and they can help you out going forward. So I'm going to move forward since that information is also in the pod now. Actually, I'm going to leave it up. So while I'm waiting to see if anybody else has questions, I'm going to actually push you out to a webinar survey. We do ask that you complete the survey. This gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about your needs and possibly add more webinars to our offerings. So once I hit the Browse To button, something might pop up in front of your screen. That'll be your webinar survey. If you're not ready to complete it yet, just minimize it. You'll come back to this screen, and when you're ready, you can go to your survey. If it doesn't pop up in front, it probably popped up behind this screen, and you can minimize this screen and go find it. All right, so I just clicked Browse To, so it should have opened for you. And I'm going to stay in the room until 3, maybe a little after 3, to answer any questions you might have. Again, please fill out the survey. That just gives us some additional information. And then if you're interested in registering for the other 4 webinars this week, you can register at eie.org/onlinepd, and you can register for any of them from that site. And if you are interested in the engineering education webinar that happened this morning, we did record that webinar, and we're going to archive it sometime in the next 2 weeks. So that information will be available on the website, also at eie.org/onlinepd. Leslie, let's see. Here. I can actually put the link. Oh, look at that. They're so fast. They did it for me. There's the link. You can access the survey by clicking directly on that link, and it'll take you to the survey. Awesome. All right, so thank you, everyone. I hope all of the videos were really helpful and that you guys are excited and hopefully a little less anxious about materials management. And like I said, if you have any questions about materials management, definitely let me know, and hopefully I can alleviate any of the other anxiety you might have. All right, thank you guys. This has been great working with some of you again for the second time today and some of you for the first time. Hopefully I will see a number of you throughout this week. Oh, it still didn't open. Leslie, if you send us an email, we can send you the survey link. If you send an email to that website, that email address, we'll send you the link. It might just be that you're opening it up on the iPad and it's a form stack form, so maybe it's not, I don't know, maybe it's just not supported by the iPad software and you might have to do it at a later point. But thank you very much for your persistence in trying to complete our survey. Yes. So these webinars are different than what we do in person. If you've attended any of it in-person professional development, we really focus in on training teachers on how to facilitate the activities in the curriculum, to provide some support, to explain some of the pedagogy behind the way the lessons are set up. These webinars are opportunities for us to fill gaps that we see in the workshops that we do. So we get to go into some areas that we don't have time to do in a one-day PD. This gives us an opportunity to spend a little bit more time on topics that teachers ask us questions about, but we don't always cover. So the ELA and engineering one tomorrow is really great if you're trying to think about